Hello and welcome to another episode of the Geotechnical Engineering Podcast. On today's episode, we'll be talking about Prashant Patil, who is a geotechnical engineer at Gessner Engineering, LLC. We'll be talking about the start of his career and some of the things that have influenced him to be where he is today. We're also going to talk about his company's mission and goal and some of the types of projects they work on. And we're going to take a deep dive into the world of pavement design, some of the considerations that go into how one designs pavement, some of the challenges, and how to overcome those challenges. I'm your host, Jared Green, and I'm excited to be bringing you another episode of the Geotechnical Engineering Podcast. But before we get started, we're going to hear a word from our sponsor for today's episode, that being Tensar, a division of CMC.
Check out Tensar Plus, the award-winning design software for construction professionals to design with geosynthetics and calculate their value on projects. Tensar Plus is simple to use with a powerful engineering system at its core. It leverages our decades of research and experience with soils all over the world, so you can count on your solutions working the first time, even in the most difficult conditions. Whether you're designing a crane pad or need to build a temporary road over muck, the cost, time, and carbon savings can be calculated, making comparison with alternatives simple. Specs, reports, and product data can be generated for your design, and training resources, research, and our third-party expert reviews are all provided conveniently in the software if needed. Usable both online and offline, the app is available in browser and on all major mobile platforms. Whatever you're working on, Tensar Plus is your toolbox for success.
Prashant, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and I appreciate you guys reaching out and basically inviting me to this. This is a great platform. I have been following you guys and watching people talk about geotechnical engineering as well as civil engineering. So I feel fortunate enough to be a part of the initiative as well. So thank you.
Thank you. No, that's great. Appreciate the feedback. It's always good to know somebody's listening on the other side.
Yeah.
Well, it would be great if you could tell our listeners and those that are watching, if you tell a little bit more about yourself, talk about your career journey and what it is you do now. That would be great to kind of set the stage for our conversation.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Prashant Patil. I'm from a small town named Lakshmi Dahiwadi in India. I know the pronunciation might be hard, but it's a very small town in India with a population of around like 15,000. I completed my undergrad in civil engineering from Solapur University, Solapur. And after my undergrad, I basically had a few options to pursue my career in geotechnical engineering in India itself. But somehow the curious person in me was basically like, maybe I should get maybe I should get some global experience or experience the globally influenced education system when it comes to geotechnical engineering. So that was one of the main reasons behind me applying to the US universities. And I think since I started studying civil engineering, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't sure if this is something that I want to be continuing as a part of my career, but geotechnical engineering was something that impressed me a lot during my undergrad. And thanks to my professors who taught me geotechnical engineering in undergrad and basically ignited that spark in me. So after that, I basically started doing more and more research or like reading more about geotechnical, and I came across Dr. Brio's profile from Texas A&M University. Mm-hmm. And that was the reason I applied to Texas A&M University and I got admitted. So I worked with Dr. Brio on my master's thesis. I completed my master's in geotechnical engineering from Texas A&M University College Station. And even before I graduated, I had a job offer from Gessner Engineering. I had a few job offers that came in around the same time. And then the $1 million question, where do I want to go, right? If you have, I think sometimes it's a good, like people say it's a good problem to have multiple job offers, but it tricks you.
Yeah.
And so I basically started looking at the companies that offered me a job. And Gessner Engineering was only one company which had all other services beyond geotechnical engineering in the same office. So my initial thought was, if I go in a geotechnical specific company, I may basically focus only on geotechnical part, but I can see the interrelation or codependencies between different aspects of civil engineering if I join Gessner Engineering. So that's why I joined the Gessner Engineering, and the rest is history. I have been working with Gessner Engineering for more than 4 years now, and it has been a wonderful experience. There are basically different types of projects which were challenging at some times. So those types of projects I worked on, and that experience has basically made me technically confident and independent. And I received my PE license last year. So I'm a new PE. Thank you so much. I'm a new PE. Obviously, people get scared when they see like those 2 letters behind your name, because the majority of people ask me a question saying, is it worth is the financial aspect or the status aspect worthy enough to additional responsibility you're taking? But my experience has been wonderful. And so I'm enjoying it. So that's something about me.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Tell us a little bit more about your company. Good history, good reputation in the field. What type of things are they doing, or what type of projects you're working on?
Yeah, so Gessner Engineering is basically a Texas-based firm. It was established in 2003, so we are completing our 20 years next month.
Okay.
So it is majorly women-owned company, and right now we have 5 production departments or services, which are basically general civil engineering, survey, geotechnical, construction material testing, structural, and we also have a project management department, which basically acts as a liaison between the company and clients to provide that support to improve the client experience. As far as the sectors are concerned, we basically are focusing more on higher education institutes or projects, and then public and municipal corporation projects. We also do residential projects as well in Texas right now. And other types of work that we do are basically commercial, medical, public, religious, and industrial work as well. So the company, just like I said, company has been well established for like 20 years now. And the main thing that I love about the company is basically the culture within the company, because everyone believes in relationships here, whether those are internal relationships or external relationships with the clients. And majority of the industry right now is very numbers driven, right? You have to achieve this much goal financially, or you have to be producing this much work only. So that is not the only factor that Gessner Engineering focuses on. So they value you as a person, relationships, and try to provide as much as support as we can to basically help you personally as well as professionally. And company has been, we have recently started working on our 2028 goals, which are like 5 years out now from now. So we are not only focusing on short-term goals and just trying to see what will happen, but planning strategically for next few years and trying to understand what we need to do in order to be there where we want to be. So company is growing very rapidly. And so everyone just wants to be somewhere, right? In a good position, somewhere big. But how do we basically set ourselves up for success is through something called as Gessner framework. So these are basically the guidelines which help us for improving our culture within the company, providing leadership, understanding behaviors, and the behavioral values basically that employees can utilize and improve the culture as well as structure of the company, and focusing more on vision that we have and how do we achieve that through goal setting. So just like I said a few seconds ago, the one thing that I love the most about the company is the culture, because for an international student who didn't have any experience in the US, joining a company who is rapidly growing and still being able to correlate or still being able to feel you're being appreciated is something that every international student or person basically looks out for, right? And so that is something that I definitely got from Gessner Engineering. So this is where we are as a Gessner Engineering, and maybe in next 5 years, you will see a totally different aspect of Gessner Engineering.
Cool.
Yeah.
So switch gears a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about Pavement today. So let's see. So geotechnical explorations or investigations, that's like the first step, right? And that's a critical phase for pavement design. Can you walk us through some of the key steps and methodologies involved in the process?
Oh, yeah, sure. So before I answer your question, I want to set up stage for why geotechnical engineering is important. But people sometimes fail to understand what is the relation or what is the science behind correlation between pavement design and geotechnical engineering. So let me take you all back to general physics class that you had. It is a free body diagram. Like we all learned about free body diagrams, right? There is a load coming from one direction, there should be reaction from the other one to keep it in equilibrium, or there are multiple forces coming in different direction, and how does it affect the stability of the structure itself. When people talk about pavement design, everybody focuses on the upward loading, the downward loading. What do I mean by downward loading is everyone just focuses on, oh, there is a truck passing by. This much is the weight that is going to be passed on the pavement. So this much should be the thickness. But there is another force, which is the upward force coming from soils. And that also affects the performance of the pavement. So people sometimes they don't realize that there is a correlation between the upward loading and then the downward loading. So upward loading is definitely provided by soils, and it is affected by the soil conditions and everything, right? So it is important for any pavement design project to know what kind of soils they are dealing with, or what are the subgrade conditions. So how do we basically analyze those? We basically divide it in multiple phases. So phase one can be data gathering. So understanding what type of loading are we expecting from vehicular traffic, right? Or what is the performance expectation? What is the duration of the pavement that they want it to perform at that level? What is the cost impact? And at the same time, geotechnical engineering will come into picture to understand the soil stratigraphy at any location or any particular site. And then once the samples are basically retrieved from the ground, testing those for index properties, strength properties is something that becomes the next step in the process itself, because we need to understand what kind of soils we have. So index properties come into picture, but for strength, just like I said, upward loading is also important. And for pavements to perform better, you need to have good or strong enough subgrade. So those parameters come into picture. And once we have all this information, then the actual modeling happens, understanding what are the soil conditions, what is the performance expected from the soils, and how does that affect the performance expectations for the pavement, and how do we correlate those. So these are some like key methodologies or steps that we utilize. Obviously, there are some other exceptions, such as weather conditions, right? Which is going to affect how soils are right now and how soils will be during the construction. So things like that also are taken into consideration, and that affects your methodology sometimes.
Okay. And what are some of the challenges? Think about some specific challenges that geotechnical engineers can encounter when they're conducting investigations for pavement design.
I think as far as challenges go, one of the main challenges, and that is not only for pavement, it is pretty much for all geotechnical projects, is the groundwater. Understanding where the groundwater is and how that is going to affect your performance of any structure, whether it is a pavement or a building or infrastructure, right, in general. So that is one of the main challenges. Weather conditions, just like I said a few minutes ago, if you have different weather conditions during geotechnical investigation and during construction, that is also going to affect overall performance of the overall design methodologies. And the other factor, the research started on this one a few decades ago, but it hasn't been seen in the industry affecting many of the geotechnical engineering analysis or awareness in general in geotechnical engineers, is sulfates. Just like I said, we are in state of Texas. So obviously I have more familiarity with the soils in the area. And one of the main factors that we deal with is soils with high shrink swell characteristics. So if we have soils with high shrink swell characteristics, one of the key factors that we do to make it work or to basically improve the performance of the pavement is stabilizing those soils. And people generally use lime in this area to stabilize the to reduce the expansion potential of soils. And so what happens in that case is, like with the sulfates and everything, we are at a risk of experiencing sulfate-induced heaves, which is more problematic than the soil itself. So things like this, understanding how much testing we need to do, understanding the geology, these are the factors that you need to keep in mind even before actually performing any geotechnical investigation. So these are the key challenges, I guess, that I see being like a hurdle between getting enough or sufficient data and designing or providing recommendations for pavement, which will be matching expectations based on soil and performance.
It's great. It's like when you hear all these challenges and opportunities, like why wouldn't everybody want to be a geotech, right? I mean, this is important stuff, a challenge, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things that I kept on hearing when I was choosing geotechnical, because I just graduated in like 2019, so it has been only 4 years. But one of the main factors that people always tell me when it comes to pavement design is, oh, you don't have to worry about it. It's civil engineer's job. You're a geotechnical engineer, but it is not the same thing, right? You're trying to get into one factor of pavement design while providing the pavement recommendations. Basically, just like I said, there is upward loading and downward loading. So having to find that balance to match the expectations is basically dependent on geotech as well. And it is very interesting. The field itself is very interesting. So I see. Well, yeah, just like you said, I don't understand why people will basically have any hesitation towards geotechnical engineering.
Yeah. So when you talk about these geotechnical investigations, there's so many factors that come into play. We'd love it if you could delve into how something such as, let's just say, soil composition, geologic conditions, environmental factors, like how do these influence the outcome of the investigations, and then therefore the pavement design recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question, to be honest. I kind of started giving hints during my previous answers, but this is a great question. Now I can combine everything that I was trying to say. So when it comes to geotechnical engineering and its effect on pavement design, there are a few things that we need to keep into consideration. So, for example, one of the things was soil composition. As I mentioned, we are based in Texas, so we have shrink swell soils or soils with higher shrink swell potential. Some states or some locations may not even have those soils, so they have totally different requirements as far as the soil performance is concerned. Even though I'm saying we get to see shrink swell soils majority in the majority part of Texas, there are still some locations or sites that we have worked on which are basically characterized by sands, loose sand, dense sand, it doesn't matter, but sands. And now different soil compositions require different attention when it comes to stabilization, when it comes to performance expectation. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, when it comes to shrink swell soils and you're trying to improve the performance of those soils, people generally consider lime stabilization, right? In case of sand, people generally consider cement stabilization. So each type of stabilizer has its own purpose. And so that will change depending upon the site conditions or soil compositions. Another main factor that we have to consider when providing recommendations for pavement design is something called as CBR, which is California Bearing Ratio, right? And so that somehow decides how kind of like a stiffness factor for soils and how soils are going to perform when it is experiencing some kind of load. So based on the soil conditions, that number will also change, which is going to affect your thickness of the pavement because the thickness gets derived from the soil parameters itself. The other thing is talking about strength, but not CBR, is like how loose soils are or how stiff or hard soils are. For anything to perform, for any kind of structure to perform better, you have to have stiff enough subgrade so that you can put something on it and for it to perform better, right? So if you have loose soils, even though your particular pavement is thick enough or stiff enough, the soil which is supporting it is not strong enough. So you still face challenges related to the performance. So soil composition or like soil conditions affect in this way. How does geotechnical variability affect it is, if I have to give an example related to Texas, I-35, like which is highway I-35, right? And so people, like if you look at the geology of Texas, majority of part towards the east of it is basically just consisting of clays and silts and sand. But if you go towards the west of that highway, you start getting into limestone. So now the CBR value generally changes. With whether it has limestone underneath or it has clays underneath. And for some of our projects we have had in Austin area, I guess, site itself will have, some part will have limestone underneath, some part won't have limestone underneath. So geological conditions will also affect how we design and how we provide recommendations for it. And as far as like environmental factors go, I would basically talk about freeze and thaw conditions or basically temperatures. So all these things are going to affect. So for example, the phenomena that we are using for design in Texas may not be applicable to Arizona based on temperature variance, or phenomena that you're using in Texas may not be applicable to some of the northern states, right? So these all factors basically affect the performance and design methodology for pavement.
That's great. And if we could delve into that a little more, we talk about climate and weather variability. It's definitely going to have an impact on the geotechnical recommendations for pavement. What are some of the specific strategies and conditions in regions that have extreme weather conditions? So, you know, you talk about like a Phoenix where it's very hot, or maybe like, I don't know, Buffalo, New York. I mean, what are some of the things that come into play there?
So basically, let's take the example of temperature to start with, right? So temperature is one of the climate conditions, or it is one of the factors of weather conditions. And so as we are looking at different types of pavements that we are doing, whether it is like, let it be like a rigid pavement with just concrete, or let it be flexible pavement with asphalt only, those things get affected by variation in temperature, right? So, or groundwater is one of the other climate conditions due to rain, heavy rain, or existing groundwater sources. So that is another thing, or freeze and thaw conditions. All these things affect the performance of the pavement or design of the pavement. So how do we basically take that into consideration is making sure that the materials that you're using or the soil conditions that you're looking at are designed for those environmental loading. With climate change and everything, the long-term performance of the pavement with these loadings is getting affected. And so how we basically look at that, or how do we basically take that into consideration for geotechnical analysis, is one of the main factors in design.
Okay, great. And when you're working on pavement design projects, how do you adapt the approach to account for the various load-bearing recommendations, especially as you talk about different types of pavement? You have highways, you have parking lots, you might have airport runways. I mean, how are you taking all that into consideration?
So for the last 20 minutes, I was talking about how geotechnical engineering is important and how loading coming from soil is going to affect the performance of the pavement, right? The other factor, or the other side of these pavement design, is basically loading or structural loading coming from the vehicular traffic, right? So depending upon what kind of pavement that we're designing, whether it is a parking lot or whether it is a highway or whether it is any kind of different road, like a private road, everything is going to have a certain amount of traffic loading. So trying to understand that and basically utilizing that information in pavement design is also important. So if we look at ACIs for parking lot design, if we look at any if we look at any government-based or like text, like we have text-based software, which is FPS or ASHTO method. So majority of these different resources that we use for providing geotechnical recommendations, or any proprietary software that we use, all of them basically take traffic loading into consideration. What type of road it is, how is it going to affect, because that decides the overall downward loading that the pavement is going to have for a design period. So understanding that and making sure that your pavement section itself is stiff enough to perform to a certain extent within the design period is the way that we take that into consideration. So just like I was explaining, if I have 100 cars passing on a road and I have 118 wheelers passing on a road, the design is going to be different because the amount of vehicular load that you're taking into consideration is totally different.
And that just makes it all the more important to make sure you're getting that information from your client early on instead of just making the assumptions, right?
Exactly. And that is what I was saying when you asked me about like methodology or key stages. The first stage that I mentioned was like data gathering. You need to get that information from the client just so that, because being a geotechnical engineer, you may not have clear understanding by yourself without talking to the client on what is the type of traffic that we are basically expecting on this particular road or parking lot. So having that information handy actually helps you in making good engineering judgment and providing the parameters that are actually applicable for the design, rather than just making some assumptions which may or may not make sense to the client or project.
Correct. So let's see. So in the context of pavement design, what role does sustainability play, and how do geotechnical recommendations contribute to environmentally responsible infrastructure development?
So this is a very good question. What I would basically say, as far as the sustainability goes, I have seen a trend where people basically are trying to use recycled material. So instead of discarding some old pavement sections during rehabilitation, you basically are going to recycle some material. Different types of cements are being used recently, or like at least people are doing research on it, on like how can we change the cement composition to reduce the carbon footprint. So as far as like geotechnical engineers role in it goes, understanding the exact properties of those materials, how does that affect your recommendations for the pavement, is something that every geotechnical engineer has to be like aware of. And understanding what are the other sources or resources that we can utilize to basically do it more. The other way to look at it is basically, some people have been, like, for example, I was talking about stabilization, right? So every single layer in pavement has a specific structural number, which provides you the overall, overall design parameter for a pavement section, and gives you an opportunity to basically make changes to the thickness of any specific layer. So keeping that in mind, how can we be providing recommendations for more sustainable designs is something important.
Excellent. Excellent. Before we take our break, when you look towards the future, what are some trends and innovations that you see emerging in the geotechnical engineering pavement design that could shape the industry in the years to come?
So as I just mentioned about like different types of cements, different type of like recycled materials, trying to see how we can be environmentally responsible as a geotechnical engineer as well. So I think these are some trends that I'm seeing nowadays with people thinking about how different climatic conditions are going to affect your design of the pavement or like recommendations that you're going to provide. So that is the trend that I'm seeing. And I think that is a great start because that is something that we need along with some soil improvement. So it would be good to see some more research or information related to that.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We're going to come back in just a minute and close this one out with Prashant and our career factor safety in segment. All right, welcome back. It's time for our career factor safety in segment. In geotechnical engineering, just like many disciplines of engineering, it's important to incorporate a factor of safety into your design. But what about incorporating a factor of safety into your actual career? Today, of course, we're speaking with Prashant Patil from Gessner Engineering, LLC. Prashant, you've already had a successful career. I know you're 4 years in, but it's been successful so far. And when you look back at this career, start of your career, let's call it, what's one thing you've implemented in your career so far to give yourself a factor of safety in your career?
That's a loaded question, but I'm more than happy to answer it. So being new to the US education system or being new to the US industry or like geotechnical industry in the US itself, one of the main things that I implemented at the very early stage of my career was always keep on listening and learning new technical things that you can, because the geotechnical industry is rapidly growing, rapidly changing. So you have to keep it up with it and keep on growing. And there are multiple ways to do it, right? So you can either take advanced courses. You can attend seminars and webinars to basically understand what are the trends in the industry, how we can keep ourselves up with it. And the other benefits or like other sides of it are basically you're developing more relationships while attending those webinars and seminars, which not only from your career's perspective, but also from your technical perspective, help you a lot. So for example, if I'm attending any webinar on chemical injections, now it is going to help me somehow in having a resource if any of my projects need that information. And now I have a person who I can basically depend on. So understanding and learning, creating more relationships throughout the industry is something that I always told myself, and it has become a factor of safety for myself.
Excellent. Excellent. So Prashant, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all the great insights with us. He shares some great information and advice I know is going to be helpful for our listeners and those that are watching. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach you? You have an email you want to share, or are you on social media?
So I would prefer sharing my LinkedIn profile, as well as they can reach out to me on my company email address, which is ppatil@gessnereng.com.
Okay, great. We'll get that in the show notes. So thank you for coming on. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed the episode today. We would love to hear your feedback, comments, and or questions. Please feel free to go to geotechnicalengineeringpodcast.com, where you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, that being episode 90, as well as links to the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, we wish you the very best in all of your geotechnical engineering endeavors. Peace.